really in dismay over all the trees that we see. And we really have a sense, we have a pretty decent tree ordinance. It's just not being enforced. And I think that's the case in many, many places across the state. Uh, and so we share your concern and dismay. And we're going to act on the local level here to try and press for more enforcement. I don't know if that's the issue elsewhere, but by all means, it's horrifying to see all the trees just being it's wall to wall clearing. So getting back to uh, what the Policy and Legislation Committee does for you, you heard a bit about the uh, action alerts that we issue. We try to be fairly judicious about that. We don't want to fill the inboxes of the members who sign up to be part of that action alert network, as I call it. Uh, and as Valerie said, we have a pretty good percentage of our members who are part of that, but more is always going to be better. And I think one of the things Travis might be able to underscore is that our voice, the Native Plant Society's voice, really is uh, greatly expanded when you join yours with ours. So, we can submit a pretty carefully uh, plotted out position on a piece of legislation, for example, uh, put a lot of science into that. And it's important for us to do that. But then just having a lot of members basically back up what we're saying. Not everybody has to submit a detailed scientific treatise or provide a whole lot of detail in order to be effective. Like, it can be a simple matter of letting your legislator know that you support or oppose a particular piece of legislation based on the information that we provide to you in the action alert. So I guess
Right.
one of the things I would suggest, if there are any of you out there that are really interested in the advocacy work of the Native Plant Society and you are not part of the Action Alert Network, please sign up. It's that easy. And then when you get the occasional action alert, we try to make it as simple and straightforward as possible for you to participate and help us make good things happen and stop bad things from happening.
And if Gene, if you don't mind me just saying, it is extremely important. A lot of you think, other people are doing it. I don't need to get engaged at that level. But while we do work in coalition with other, organizations, whether it's Audubon, Sierra Club, Springs Council, we're a unique voice. The society provides a very unique perspective on some things, and it matters when I'm in the halls all the time. I'm in and out of these offices constantly, and when I walk in and they've heard from the Florida Native Plant Society on a particular bill or an issue, um, it matters. And they see me all the time, but if they're hearing from folks, especially that are constituents, and that are passionate about these issues, and as Gene said, it does not the issue the goal isn't to provide them with every scientific um, bit of information. It's to provide them with the knowledge that somebody in my district cares. We can provide, the subject matter experts and expertise, and pick those of you that are able to do that. But that first level of grassroots engagement is that you are involved and engaged, and then that matters. It's that air war that then opens it up for us to be able to go deeper. So again, I would just end this by saying, if you have not already signed up, sign up. Next week, the session season gets underway with the organizational session. All the new folks elected November 5th and others will get all sworn in. They'll start with committee meetings in December and a very aggressive committee meeting agenda for December, January, and February. And then before you know it, we're into session, but they will start hearing on issues and bills, even before March. So it's important to get signed up.
And I would just mention also that I expect this next legislative session, we might uh, really have some important things coming up where we think the Native Plant Society will be well positioned to help influence some some of the items that are really important to us.
Agreed.
I don't know how much Travis might want to say about any of that, but I think you'll be proud to be supporting our efforts for you in Tallahassee.
Yeah, and that there's just over the last months, it's been kind of a one disappointing headline after another in a lot of ways. Um, but through that awareness and through some of the brash um, decisions that have been made, thinking, nobody's caring about something, and they just go, really too far on some things. There's now been that backlash that you always see, and the Florida Native Plant Society is kind of spearheading some of the things, and I'll just use as like an example on the issue of state parks. We saw some decisions being made or proposals being put out there that would have just changed the dynamic of the parks, irrevotably and harmfully. And that really kind of woke up uh, folks on all sides and all parts of the spectrum, from those that would be on the right to the left, that are saying, and there's just has been this universal, no matter what in Florida, I think some of the universal things that we can decide on is we've got growth happening at record and rapid paces, and it's not being done smartly. And even those on the far right, also agree that, hey, we've got to get a handle on development, and certainly going into the state parks is just just unacceptable. So legislation that we've been a part of developing and pushing is going to get moving here in short order, and you're going to want to be engaged because you'll get those alerts as that begins to move its way through the process, and we'll want to be a part of that. So I'll just use that as an example for now.
Yes.
That's a great example. And we're getting a lot of people joining us a bit later, so I just wanted to reiterate, just reintroduce ourselves. So to my left, I guess, to my right is Eugene Kelly, our president and also chair of our Policy and Legislation Committee. I'm Valerie Anderson, Director of Communications and Programming, and below me is Travis Moore um, with More Relations. He is our Government and Public Affairs Consultant. And I'm not speaking very much because, as a consequence of some recent legislative action, uh, there are trees in my neighborhood being cut down because it's not because it's no longer, like, permits aren't really needed anymore. You don't have to prove that you're supposed to prove that the tree is unhealthy or causing damage, but in effect, this that no one checks any sort of.
You should ask to see the arborist report on those particular trees someday. Someday. But anyway, we digress.
So, Gene, could you talk a little bit about what local chapters do and how you could get involved in your local chapter's policy efforts? See if your chapter
Sure.
does have policy efforts, and if not, how to work with, like, your president, that sort of thing.
Well, you hit on an important characteristic of the Native Plant Society, I think. We have 30 plus chapters, and I think that Native Plant Society chapters really have a lot of autonomy, an ability to act on their own. Uh, the Policy and Legislation Committee and the State Board, we really have a full plate looking at the things that are going on at the state level and occasionally at the federal level, and sometimes more regional or local efforts will get involved in them if they really have statewide implications. But by and large, we can't become too involved in a lot of the things that are happening in your local community, but you can as a chapter. We have policy statements, position statements that we've adopted on various issues. We need to develop more of those, but that provides a basis for chapters to know how they could go out and advocate on local conservation or environmental issues and not be at odds with the state position on that particular item. That's why we have those statements. But within the realm of if it's consistent with our thinking and policy, then you should be able to act on that locally. But another important point is a lot of those local issues or regional issues that do have statewide ramifications, implications. Sometimes we aren't even aware of those unless a chapter brings them to our attention. So it is definitely a two-way street. We send out action alerts, and I can tell you that some of the action alerts we've sent have come about when somebody at a chapter raised a red flag about something that was, just we had no awareness of it. And I think we might be getting to a couple of those issues a bit later on in this discussion, but it is a two-way street. If there's something happening that's bothering you, that you think is really important, bring it to our attention. We may say we can't really do a whole lot to help you. We'll do what we can, but it might be one of those things where we have to thank you for bringing it to our attention because it's important that we really do engage.
And then, so people can bring items to your attention. They can bring items to their local president's attention. They can, work on a local issue, whether it's a conservation land program or something else. I've just switched mics, Kimberly. Can you let me know how I sound? I've received feedback that people couldn't hear me. And
Well,
then, go ahead.
if somebody wants to bring something to our attention that they really think we need to know about and be acting on, policy@fnps.org. That is one of my several email addresses now, but maybe easier to remember since it is a policy and legislation committee related issue. You could also reach me at president@fnps.org. So if you can just remember either of those email addresses, if something comes up, please feel free to contact me. Put it on my radar.
And again, it's so important. Really, it's now more than ever kind of thing that if we're able to say that something is impacting or coming from a local issue and in a local chapter, it just it helps as we deal with policymakers where we can say, hey, this is an issue and be very specific about, let's use Hernando again as an example. This is coming from Hernando County. So, Senator Ingoglia, who represents that area, we're able to say to him, this was brought to our attention. We're helping to address it here in Tallahassee, but it's not like we've said in Tallahassee to the chapters, we're directing you. You're helping bubble up issues from those local places, and that really makes a difference how a policymaker responds to that. And it may be that fixing your local issue, we're using that because it's addressing an issue that's statewide, but we're able to kind of the kick into the door is that this is something that's important locally.
Thanks, Travis. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things we have coming up are our legislative delegations. And so that's something that happen around the state. And those things are, while we do have state positions, these are legislative delegations run by local county commissioners and local legislations, and they're usually at your county commission chambers. And so, Eugene, do you want to describe what we want from our members and how we're going to organize people to speak on those issues?
Sure. Uh, yes, those legislative delegation meetings are quite likely the simplest way for any of us to actually be in the same room as all our local state legislators and often county commissioners, since uh, they often help organize and will usually attend those meetings. So if there is one of these local issues that really concerns you, you can have every state representative and every state senator who has some part of their district in your county all in one meeting, and you have the opportunity to sign up to speak, go to a microphone, usually 3 minutes. Uh, but in 3 minutes, you can say quite a lot, and you are a constituent. You are one of the people that they literally were elected to serve. Uh,
Yeah.
so it gives you a lot of power in those meetings. What I'm hoping we can do in the past, we really tried to promote that everybody try to go to these meetings. Uh, when it comes to actually trying to coordinate with you, our members, the very least we can do is let you know when the dates, when all those different delegation meetings are happen, the location, how or if you need to sign up in advance to be able to speak. But I am expecting that uh, with guidance from Travis, we will actually also be making a special effort to target particular legislative delegations where if you attend, not only are those your representatives in the state legislature, but they might play important leadership roles, either in the Senate or the House or on a particular committee that will deal with issues really important to us. So again, that extra power you have as a constituent when you're speaking to these legislators, if we can prep you in advance, share information about the issues that are really going to be on the table this year and of relevance to the society and our mission, we can make a special effort to ensure that those chapters, those members, know about those meetings and how extra important it is that some of them try to go and point to our issues and make sure that their legislators are aware.
Yeah. And oftentimes, it's important in some instances, a lot of instances, you sign up in advance. That's obviously important. But if not, you can sign up when you're there. You just would be down on the list. As Gene said, there's 67 of them because there's 67 counties. They're 3 minutes is usually what you get. You'll hear from most of the speakers, or they're asking for money. They're organizations that get state dollars or attempt to get state dollars for their programming. But there'll be all kinds of issues being brought up. But even if you don't speak, and that would be great, you get a chance to kind of buttonhole legislators as they're coming and going. They're leaving to go to the restroom to get coffee. They're coming in and out of the room. You're able to the important thing is for them to hear Florida Native Plant Society, that, hey, we're here as a resource on issues that'll pop up from time to time. You'll be hearing from us in alerts, but also, here's my information, my email, my phone number. If you or your staff, have an issue crosses your desk and you want information about it, use me as a resource. And then you can always find, we can always get you the proper information or the proper person if and when they do reach out. But and then, as Gene said, there'll be some legislators, Senator Broder in Central Florida, in like Seminole County. He's the chair of the Appropriations Committee subcommittee that'll be dealing with DEP and the environment and conservation, and whether they're spending money on surplusing lands. All of those things go through that committee. And important for him to be hearing that, hey, I'm here, I'm in your district, I'm around, and if you need information, I'm the point person for you, so that it holds them accountable.
And not only that, as Travis said, even if you don't speak, you may not get a chance to speak. But if you can maybe even get a word, if there's a particular legislator there, you know, it could just be the foot in the door, the icebreaker you
Right.
need to schedule an in-person meeting at their district office. They all have an office that is local within their district, just down the road from you. And so in that case, if you and maybe a short group from your chapter, maybe you have several people that kind of act as your voice, and they can get more than 3 minutes. Maybe they get 15 or 20 or 30 minutes of personal attention with the legislator, and if not the legislator, then one of their staff members who have considerable influence over uh, I don't want to say influence over what the legislators do, but they have a relationship there, and they can pass on our information and help make things happen. So there's all kinds of benefit that comes from just making yourself known out there and building relationships that uh, they may be even more important a little further down the road if something more extreme or uh, critical comes up.
So what's the timeline for these meetings? Are they starting soon?
Yeah, they're starting. So again, next week, members will get sworn in. So they'll start having them um, because next week's organization, then the next week's Thanksgiving week. Look for these to start that first of December, and they'll have them through December, January, and February, because they're required. If there's any local bills, all kinds of things, they have to have the delegation vote on those, and so that's why they have these meetings.
We have a suggestion from Kimberly Gibbs, suggests that we have an FNPS list of counties, which we have done in the past. We've listed the legislative delegations and their times and locations and all of that. And then, but then that we have volunteer FNPS members to serve as ambassadors. So like designated FNPS members who maybe have some training, and that contact person would encourage others to attend.
That would be outstanding. I would love that.
And then, so Cynthia Holler asks, what are the best items to be speaking to the legislators on? So in the past, we've had like a wish list or like a white paper on what we would like to happen in a given legislative session. We've usually published these around the times of legislative delegations. Do you think we're going to have one of those this year, Gene?
We will absolutely put together a short laundry list of the issues that we think will be really important. Uh, we don't want to come across with too many items. For one thing, 3 minutes. If this does come down to an opportunity to speak at a delegation meeting, you can say quite a bit in 3 minutes, but it will go by faster than you think it might. So we really will come out with some guidance to really pinpoint what we think will be uh, the most important things to bring up. And as always, I will tell you now, funding for land conservation. We have to beat the bulldozers. And every year, I know we beat this drum over and over, but support for Florida Forever and for its counterpart program at Department of Agriculture, the Rural and Family Lands Program. We want to see those fully funded and every year so we can beat the bulldozers everywhere possible.
Right. Okay, so now that we've gone over sort of what FNPS does and how you can get involved, I did prepare a short PowerPoint presentation on what we've been working on and sort of current updates on the issues that we've been following. So I'm going to kind of move these windows around so that left screen, image. So you guys are going to get smaller.
this guy over. Okay, so you guys can't see this, Gene and Travis, but I have a slide up that has current issues, and so it's listing our current issues as tracking the Florida State Parks Great Outdoor Initiative, which is currently on pause. The 2024 legislative session, which we just discussed, the legislative delegations that are starting soon, and then the Withlacoochee State Forest land swap with the golf course development. And then other ongoing programs that we keep an eye on are Free the Ocklawaha / Rodman Dam issue, and then Split Oak Forest.
Okay,
And so,
so
go ahead.
you want us to start at the top of that list?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, well, on the state park issue, well, Travis alluded to some legislation that the Native Plant Society has partnered with others on that we hope will prevent proposals like that from coming up again. That seems like the most important kind of proactive step. We did see the recent departure of the Secretary of DEP, and he is being replaced. We don't we don't know if that is really a reflection of the controversy that surrounded the proposal they dropped on us all back in August, I guess it was. But I think that I think we're going to be successful heading that one off at the pass. I don't know if we'll ever see that pause ended. It might just stay paused. And we want what would really be more of a permanent fix by passing some legislation that would actually be new policy on how those kinds of conservation lands can be used.
Yeah, and we'll have more in the coming weeks. We have some meetings that are already scheduled, and we're working on this at very high levels in really the next several days before Thanksgiving. And so we'll have more, but we'd like to have a park protection bit of legislation so that this type of thing isn't able to be done just by kind of executive direction, that there would be that the law would provide the protections that are necessary.
Okay. And maybe just picking up, going from there to the parcel swap that was proposed for Withlacoochee State Forest. I'm going to make some assumptions about what those of you have tuned in might already know, but in a nutshell, the cabinet, the governor and cabinet, approved pretty surreptitiously last June this request from a private development interest for them to purchase so that they could in turn develop 324 acres that are part of Withlacoochee State Forest. And those lands were actually added to the state forest after Department of Transportation purchased them for $6 million and then gave title to the state so it could be managed as part of the state forest. And they did that not out of the goodness of their heart, but because they built a highway, a northern extension of the Suncoast Parkway through part of the state forest. And they took out a bunch of sandhill habitat, really good, high quality sandhill habitat. And so this 324 acres is land that was, and with a little nurturing, could be, again, good sandhill habitat. But this private development interest has 3 golf courses immediately next door, and they want to develop more golf courses, homes. They haven't said what all they would do on this property, but in exchange for purchasing that from the state, they would give the state 860 something acres in Levy County, not contiguous with any kind of existing conservation land, unlike that 324 acres that the golf course developer is coveting, which is contiguous with the citrus tract of the state forest. So we have made the case that there's a lot of conservation value to that land. There is no conservation benefit to doing a swap like that, even though the other lands are, more in number of acres. There's a lot more involved in measuring conservation value than number of acres. So we are opposing that. We and partners have made, I think, a very good case for the conservation values of those lands. Uh, the decision is supposed to be made by the director of the Forest Service and by the Acquisition and Restoration Council at DEP. We are monitoring the ARC meetings for when this is on the agenda. There have been 2 meetings since it all came to light that this had been proposed, and they have not scheduled it. We again are kind of optimistic that the vociferous and passionate response and opposition to this has kind of got them on their heels, and they're not quite sure what to do. But we are watching and listening and ready to move forward. So far, there has not been any kind of real response to all the opposition statements that they have received. I don't know if you have anything to elaborate on there, Travis.
No, I mean, that was a good summary of a kind of a complex situation. But we're kind of using the same angst and arguments that we're using for the state park issue, because this happens to be a golf course kind of a move, on this to say, while it's not maybe a state park, it's a state forest. It's still there's a lot of similarities, and the fact that the state had this land was already in response to and in recognition that they were taking sensitive land for the parkway. And then this just further would water it down. And at some point it's like, all right, so you could just pick to give, you can do a swap, and the conservation benefit doesn't matter anymore, because that's where we are. So I feel good. There's always shenanigans and things happen, but I feel good at least that it didn't get put onto that first agenda and rammed right through before the public had a chance to weigh in and percolate on this.
And just to kind of distill this down, why this is really important, and goes far beyond those 324 acres. There is a process in place for state lands to be surplused. In other words, they're in conservation, but they're going to be sold back into private ownership, and that those determinations come from the agency that manages them, and then there usually has to be a supermajority vote to approve a finding that these lands should be sold as surplus, because they're essentially saying these lands no longer have conservation value. It makes sense for the state to unload lands if they don't actually have conservation value. In this case, lands that obviously have conservation value are being proposed for surplus, and the request did not come from the state agency. It didn't come from the professional land managers who know what about the conservation values. It's from a private development interest. And so really, if you distill this down to its essence, we can't let decisions about what lands the state conserves and holds in conservation, we can't leave that to the whims of private development interests. Those are our lands, and we should keep them. It's as simple as that. We can't put the developers in charge of what we're actually going to conserve. Yeah, and those
It's
lands
kind of
were.
it's kind of the headline for that whole slide. I mean, I can't see the slide right now, but it's what do these things have in common? It's a and it's circumventing a process that I mean, that's in place that should be being used, and it's not.
And we're asked to accept mitigation as a strategy for compensating for environmental impacts. Well, ultimately, what does it mean to mitigate? Split oak was mitigation, and yet here it is not really being protected as it should be.
Right, right.
Uh, and
And if it becomes
here's
just where the developer gets to decide it, the developer could just buy a bunch of, inexpensive uh, land, in other places and just use it as a mitigation bank to offset whenever they decide, hey, we want other land. We'll give you state, and it shouldn't be, as Gene alluded to. It's not about, well, we're only taking 300 and some acres and we're giving you 800 and some. That's not the point. It's where it is, what its conservation purpose is. It's that's where the value is. Value in land isn't it's where it is. I mean, I could sell you an acre that's sitting next to Central Park, and it's probably going to be, there's a value to that that's not the same as an acre that's sitting in the middle of, somewhere else. So
We have a question
right.
in the chat. Amy Green says, why aren't there deed restrictions imposed when the original mitigation happened? I can answer that question, Amy. Usually there are deed restrictions that are put in place. Yet,
yeah,
that's the issue when we have government that is not responsive to maintaining rules, to following rules that
Yeah.
exist, is that it doesn't really
Right.
matter what rules are put in place if the people and companies in power can go around those rules.
and we're also working on legislation, Amy, that would strengthen this. The surplusing wouldn't be able to just be decided by the, uh, it would have to go to a third part, a judicial kind of review. An independent third party, let's call it, would have to say, hey, look, this is the taxpayers' land, and we here on behalf of the taxpayers are saying you can't just make an agreement on some of these things where there was like a conservation easement between the agency and the developer. It that you know it needs to that you guys can't just decide in a room somewhere, we no longer these conservation easements don't matter. So there's some, because you're right, there's some rules that need to be enhanced.
And Travis just pulled back the curtain a little bit on another exciting thing we have going on. We'll just leave it at that for now. But the Native Plant Society is involved in some pretty, exciting, important
these are
strategies.
these are family members, Gene. We can expound a bit. They'll keep it in the family.
Yeah.
And so Amy follows this question with, it seems like only public benefit projects should be considered if any mitigation lands are diverted. I think that's sort of the key here, is what Travis is alluding to, is that bringing in rules that involve a third party that in some way represents the public's interest inherent in the conservation land, is something that's currently missing in the state of Florida. You have agency decision making, local government decision making, and these decisions, while they may be occurring in public meetings, or in the case of the Pucci State Forest, in the case of some state parks, not occurring in the public eye, that there is no external party with the public's best interests that can make a final decision. And so a lot of the
Right.
things that Florida Native Plant Society is working on, other organizations are working on, is reincorporating the public's best interest in these conservation land decisions.
Right.
Yeah. I I guess to, try and put it simply, if an agency holds a conservation easement, they could, without any kind of oversight, at a request of the landowner, extinguish that easement. There's nothing that prohibits them from doing that. And they are the ones that decide. And what we're getting at here is that instead of them deciding, there would be a third party, on the judicial side that would be the ones that look at the arguments for or against surplusing or giving up the easement or the conservation land. They will be the ones making that decision, and it will be based on the public interest and existing statutory guidance. So it's basically checks and balances that we're trying to install in decisions about conservation easements and surplusing public lands.
Okay, so I know you have you have to go at 1, so I just want to
Yeah.
wrap up and make sure that people understand exactly what we've done on with Lucucci. So we sent that letter to Rick Dolan, and we did not
Yes.
receive acknowledgement for receipt for quite some time. We did finally receive that.
Yes. After we followed up and said, what gives? What's up? Yeah.
And so basically we're just tracking the ARC meetings. I have obviously I have my GIS open, so I'm going to be having a look at, there have been some recent additions to nearby Florida Forever projects to that swap parcel. And so we haven't quite analyzed that yet, but tracking what's going on in these ARC meetings is,
And there is an upcoming meeting of a land conservation group, we and a number of our partner organizations, and we'll discuss this issue, and maybe there will be some other approach that we all decide that we should start pursuing on that particular issue.
okay. And then we can go to the updates. We can finalize our updates. So just again, I posted this recent article by Kimberly Miller of the Palm Beach Post. You can't see this, Gene, obviously, but it was something that Travis sent around, and that the details of the Jonathan Dickinson State Park golf controversy still shady months later. So yeah, details are still obscure as to like what exactly happened and why it happened. I'll post the link in the chat so everybody can have a look at that article. And then Gene mentioned that we supported a bill in Congress recently.
Yes. Maxwell Frost, one of the representatives for the Orlando area in the U.S. House, has partnered to put forward a bill that would create youth leadership councils to, provide some guidance, some voice for their perspective to the U.S. EPA and other federal agencies. And the idea being young people deserve to have a prominent voice in decision making on the climate crisis. And so we supported the legislation to create these councils. And I think just today there was a press release that came out announcing this bill. It acknowledged the Native Plant Society, among others, as supporting it. It included a quote from us, but we're certainly proud to be supporting that piece of legislation.
And then I switched to the updates to a different slide on the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. Do you want to
Yes,
describe how we've been engaged in that, working with Georgia Native Plant
sure.
Society?
And actually, a bit more than a year ago, I believe it was March of last year, the Native Plant Society submitted a letter to the Georgia Department of Natural Resources expressing our opposition to issuance of a permit that had been applied for that would allow titanium mining on lands adjacent to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. And if you wonder why Florida Native Plant Society is concerned, well, this area where they would do the mining, it's projected it would have severe hydrologic impacts on groundwater levels in the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, and specifically in areas of the refuge that are the headwaters for both the St. Mary's River and the Swanee River. So we definitely have a stake in this decision. Two of our more pristine rivers, natural resources. And so we opposed that. There is now an effort, a proposal by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that manages the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, that they expand the boundary of the refuge to allow them to pursue the purchase of additional surrounding lands, and that includes the lands where this mine has been proposed. If this is guaranteed, it at least opens the door to that being negotiated. There's no guarantee that the landowner would be willing to sell those lands, but we support the expansion, and we hope it goes forward. The more salient thing is we have to submit formal comments by November 18th. That will be easy, but it doesn't give us time to really harness the power of our members. So there is an expectation that public comment period will be extended. And if it is extended for another several weeks, we might issue an action alert on this issue. If not statewide, at least to some of the chapters in the northern end of the state, but very likely to all of you, so that you can also add your voice to ours and help increase protection of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. Our partners in that include the Georgia Native Plant Society. They are actively involved in this. And at a recent public meeting last week, Chad Scott, a member of ICSIA and a member of the Policy and Legislation Committee, he went there and he spoke to express the Native Plant Society's support for expanding the refuge.
I was really happy he was able to act so quickly and get up to Georgia and do that.
Yes.
Travis has to bounce off to another Zoom.
Do the land conservation one, so it's gotta go lend our voice to that group. So thank you all. Have a good weekend, and I'll follow up obviously with Gene if there's any additional questions or anything.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your expertise.
Underscore again, it's a two-way street. If there's something going on and you're not sure we're aware of it, send an email. If you can't get it to me, get it to Valerie, and we'll take a look at it and hopefully be able to expand our reach with your help.
Yes. And we did just get a comment from email, and they didn't state who they are. This was forwarded to me by Charisse, our admin person. Says that basically a testimonial that getting involved with your legislators really works. So it really worked for this person. They said, they thought that they didn't really think that they could make a difference and that their legislators wouldn't hear them. And they started tracking committee meetings at myfloridahouse.gov and floridasenate.gov and their phone numbers for Tallahassee and their local offices. And they said that one year they got really involved, followed the committee meetings, and expressed their opinions. And the staff were really responsive and even told them how much their advocacy meant to them.
It's very true. Thanks for sharing that, unnamed member or guest. Thank you. It's an important message to share.
So yeah, I did want to say that if you are really enthusiastic about the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, and preventing that titanium mine and supporting the expansion, the Georgia Native Plant Society does have an action alert active through the 18th. So you can take action without us issuing an alert.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Sure. I posted that link in the chat. So if you have any questions about policy, getting involved, getting with your local chapter president, please contact me or Charisse at info@fnps.org. If you have a policy question, would like to get involved with our statewide policy and legislation committee, please contact Gene, policy@fnps.org. And we really appreciate your membership in FNPS and your engagement in all of these issues. And, we live in a tough environment right now, and it's just getting tougher. And, so I just want everyone to take care of themselves and do your best to make a difference where we can.
Very good.
And thank you, Gene. Thank you for all your hard work as president and for everything you've done for policy in Florida.
All right. And take care, everybody. Hope you have a nice Thanksgiving.